Ever wondered how a war could be fought across an ocean so vast it covers a third of the planet? The Pacific theater of World War II wasn't just a sidebar to the conflict in Europe. It was a brutal, sprawling epic of its own, fought from the frozen Aleutian Islands to the dense jungles of Southeast Asia. This was a war of island hopping, naval titans clashing, and unimaginable human endurance. Forget what you think you know. We're about to dive deep into the timeline of the Pacific War, from the surprise attack that ignited a firestorm to the final, world-altering conclusion. This is the story of how empires clashed and the world was reshaped, one island, one battle at a time. Let's set the stage. By the late 1930s, the Empire of Japan was already on a path of aggressive expansion, driven by a need for resources like oil and rubber, and fueled by a powerful militaristic ideology. Japan had invaded Manchuria in 1931 and launched a full-scale war with China in 1937. The United States, along with Britain and the Netherlands, responded with economic sanctions, culminating in a crippling oil embargo in July 1941. For Japan's military leaders, this was a point of no return. They believed they had a stark choice: either concede to American demands and abandon their imperial ambitions, or seize the resources they needed from Southeast Asia by force. They chose force, but to do that, they had to eliminate the one power in the Pacific that could stop them, the United States Pacific Fleet. And that brings us to the date that will live in infamy, December 7, 1941. In a meticulously planned and devastatingly executed surprise attack, Japanese carrier-based aircraft struck the American naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The assault was catastrophic. In less than 2 hours, a huge portion of the U.S. Pacific Fleet was sunk or damaged, and thousands of American lives were lost. Japan's goal was to deliver a knockout blow that would keep the U.S. out of the war long enough for them to consolidate their new empire. But they miscalculated. The attack didn't break the American spirit, it galvanized it. The very next day, the United States declared war on Japan, officially entering World War II on a global scale. The Pacific War had begun. Following Pearl Harbor, the Japanese military seemed unstoppable. They launched a lightning-fast series of offensives across Southeast Asia and the Pacific. Guam and Wake Island fell quickly. Hong Kong surrendered on Christmas Day. In the Philippines, American and Filipino forces under General Douglas MacArthur were forced into a desperate retreat, eventually surrendering on the Bataan Peninsula, leading to the infamous Bataan Death March. The impregnable British fortress of Singapore fell in February 1942, a shocking defeat for the Allies. Japanese forces pushed into Burma, the Dutch East Indies, and New Guinea. By the spring of 1942, the Empire of Japan controlled a vast swathe of territory, its greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, stretching across the Pacific. It seemed as if the rising sun would never set. But the tide was about to turn. The first sign that Japan was not invincible came in April 1942. In a daring, one-way mission known as the Doolittle Raid, American B-25 bombers launched from an aircraft carrier and struck Tokyo. The raid did minimal physical damage, but its psychological impact was immense. It proved to the Japanese that their homeland was vulnerable and boosted American morale when it was needed most. Then, in May, came the Battle of the Coral Sea. It was a tactical victory for Japan as they sank the U.S. carrier Lexington, but strategically it was a crucial win for the Allies. For the first time, a Japanese invasion force was turned back, saving Port Moresby in New Guinea from capture. Most importantly, it was the first naval battle in history fought entirely by carrier aircraft, a sign of how this war would be won or lost. The true turning point, the pivotal moment of the entire Pacific War, arrived just 1 month later. In June 1942, the Japanese Navy, confident after its string of victories, sought to lure the remaining U.S. carriers into a trap and destroy them at Midway Atoll. But American codebreakers had cracked Japan's naval codes. Admiral Chester Nimitz knew exactly what was coming. He set his own trap. In the ensuing Battle of Midway, American dive bombers, in a heart-stopping few minutes, found the Japanese carriers at their most vulnerable moment, while refueling and rearming their planes. They sank all 4 of Japan's frontline aircraft carriers, the Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. It was a devastating blow from which the Japanese Navy would never fully recover. The victory at Midway ended Japan's offensive capability and allowed the United States to finally go on the attack. With the initiative seized, the Allies began the long, bloody process of pushing the Japanese back. This was the start of the island-hopping campaign, a strategy of bypassing heavily fortified Japanese islands and instead seizing smaller, less defended, but strategically important islands to build airfields and advance ever closer to Japan. The first major test of this strategy began in August 1942 at Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. What was planned as a quick operation turned into a brutal 6-month campaign of attrition on land, at sea, and in the air. U.S. Marines and Army soldiers fought viciously against determined Japanese defenders in the sweltering jungle, while the navies clashed in a series of ferocious nighttime battles in the waters nearby. The fighting was savage, but by February 1943, the island was secured. Guadalcanal proved that American forces could outfight the Japanese in a jungle environment and marked the beginning of the long road to Tokyo. For the next 2 years, the island-hopping campaign became the defining feature of the Pacific War. It was a relentless grind across the vast Pacific Ocean, led by 2 major Allied thrusts. In the Central Pacific, Admiral Nimitz's forces leaped from atoll to atoll, Tarawa, Kwajalein, Eniwetok. These were bloody, costly battles, often against Japanese defenders who fought to the last man. Meanwhile, in the Southwest Pacific, General MacArthur led his forces up the coast of New Guinea and into the Philippines, fulfilling his famous promise, "I shall return." This dual-pronged advance kept constant pressure on the Japanese, stretching their resources thin and methodically dismantling their defensive perimeter. Each captured island became a new stepping stone, a new airbase bringing American bombers closer and closer to the Japanese home islands. As the Allies closed in, the war reached a new level of ferocity. In June 1944, the invasion of Saipan in the Mariana Islands was a particularly brutal fight. The victory was strategically vital, as it finally put American B-29 Superfortress bombers within range of mainland Japan. The naval battle that accompanied it, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, was nicknamed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot because American pilots, with superior aircraft and training, decimated the Japanese naval air forces. Later that year, MacArthur's return to the Philippines led to the Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944. This was the largest naval battle in history, a sprawling, chaotic engagement that saw the virtual end of the Imperial Japanese Navy as an effective fighting force. It was also during this battle that Japan officially unleashed a terrifying new tactic, the kamikaze, or suicide attacks, where pilots would deliberately crash their planes into Allied ships. By 1945, the end was in sight, but the fighting was more desperate and costly than ever. The invasion of Iwo Jima in February was a horrific battle for a tiny volcanic island, desired for its airfields as an emergency base for B-29s. The image of the flag raising on Mount Suribachi became an enduring symbol of American sacrifice and resolve. Then came Okinawa in April. It was the last major battle of World War II, a massive 82-day struggle that involved over 500,000 U.S. personnel. The fighting was apocalyptic, with fierce Japanese resistance, mass civilian casualties, and relentless kamikaze attacks. The staggering losses on Okinawa, for both sides, heavily influenced the American decision-making process for the planned invasion of Japan, which military planners predicted would result in millions of casualties. With the Japanese military shattered but refusing to surrender, the final chapter of the war arrived. President Harry S. Truman was faced with a grim choice: a full-scale invasion of Japan or the use of a new, terrible weapon. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima. The city was instantly devastated. Still, Japan's leadership remained deadlocked. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. That same day, the Soviet Union, honoring its agreement with the Allies, invaded Japanese-held Manchuria, quickly overwhelming the Japanese forces there. Faced with this overwhelming combination of atomic destruction and a new Soviet front, Emperor Hirohito finally intervened. On August 15th, he announced Japan's surrender to his people via a radio address. On September 2, 1945, aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, the formal surrender documents were signed, officially ending World War II. The war that had engulfed the planet for 6 long years was finally over. From the fire at Pearl Harbor to the solemn ceremony in Tokyo Bay, the Pacific War was a conflict of immense scale and sacrifice that fundamentally reshaped our world. It was a story of empires rising and falling, of technological innovation, and of the incredible courage and endurance of millions of people across a vast ocean. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through one of history's most defining conflicts. If you found this history as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments which battle or event you'd like to see covered next. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.